Hello everybody, and welcome back to my beginner Let's Plays. This is the first episode of a new series. I've decided to restart, as the last one had some mechanical errors initially. I started recording before this version of the game was out, and made some mechanical errors in the interim. I've decided to restart this series to provide a better, more educated look at the game from an experienced player's perspective. We're going to be working through mechanics, pausing more, and I will be cutting together bits where it makes sense. The goal of this Let's Play is to help you build a fortress from scratch and make it well defended. We'll be settling in a calm biome with a light aquifer and building as efficiently as I can, within reason, to maximize storytelling and create an interesting narrative. If you're new to the game, this is probably a very good place to start. If you watched my previous series, this might be a good spot to start too, as I will be explaining some things differently, as well as adding in other ideas that might be wise for a beginner fortress. So I hope that you'll join me on this beginner Let's Play. We're going to start off by generating a world. Now, as always, we're going to stick with the default settings, except I am going to turn mineral occurrence from everywhere to frequent. That's my only change, because I personally prefer sparse, and that's where I personally play. However, frequent might be better for this particular episode, as it'll give us more options and variety for different late game crafting, especially with metals. We're going to dive into the world now. I just want to remind everybody that up in the top left is one of the most important things to look at during world generation. This is the Chronicle. It is going to explain things that are happening in Legends mode in real time. Of course, there is no shame in simply pausing and restarting world generation if you decide you don't like the particular world that you've ended up with, as there's going to be a lot of different variety from world to world. You can take a quick peek around and just have a glance. I do see a lot of good spots. I'm kind of feeling this area up here. We got humans, we've got a couple elves, and we have our lovely Dwarven faction here. I think this is what we're going to aim for. I'm going to click play now, and we're not going to prepare carefully on this embark. I'm going to try and find a good place to embark, and when we find it, I will explain why, and that's when we'll continue. Our civilization of choice is the Palace of Years, a small Dwarven faction with 1,400 population, 19 sites, and a good spot up here in the north. It's going to have an interesting seasons. It's going to give us a good amount of variety. So what we're looking for is a location with a light aquifer, soil, ideally some sand. Sand is optional, however. A good variety of metals, and a calm embark. If I look right here, this is actually a pretty good spot. We can check elevation by clicking on this button right here. You'll see green, which is lower elevation. The more dark the color gets, the higher the elevation. We can look at our cliffs and gradings. And this is very much a likable spot right here. We do have humans close by, as well as elves. No goblins in the general vicinity, which is good. And I think this might be our spot. Just a nice, calm spot with a brook that we can dig through, as well as shallow clay, shallow sand, very deep soil, a light aquifer, iron, gold, silver, copper, and a flux stone layer for making steel. We're going to click the embark button, and we're going to leave it the default size, instead of increasing the size or decreasing the size, just as it is best for frame rate, and will just keep the game as playable as possible throughout this tutorial series. We don't want the frame rate to get bad, and that tends to happen if you make larger biomes. Although, if you're brave and are okay with a stop-motion fortress, feel free to crank that up as much as you like. Now, it's going to give you a warning saying that you have selected an area with salt water, which is interesting. It might be very difficult to survive here. You have selected an area with a light aquifer. Water might need to be pumped out or carried away. That is okay. We're going to simply click play now, leaving everything on default. And this is where we are going to spend the rest of our fortress life, a Dwarven Outpost. You have arrived after a journey from the mountain homes into the forbidding wilderness beyond. Your harsh trek has finally ended, and your party of 7 is to make an outpost for the glory of all Kosoth Id. There is almost no supplies left, but with stout labor comes sustenance, whether by bolt, plow, or hook, provide for your dwarves. You are expecting a supply caravan just before the winter entombs you, but it is spring now. Enough time to delve secure lodgings, ere the dingoes get hungry. A new chapter of Dwarven history begins here, at this place. Nogret Thonol. Weather Mountains. Strike the earth. Considering we didn't prepare carefully or pick that name, I really like that name. I have a good feeling about this one. The goal for this particular episode is to cover farming, as well as pigtails, plump helmets, wood, and carpentry. Get some beds set up, and ideally have a decent fortress layout by the end of spring. By midsummer, we want to be ready for traders, and by fall, we want to be able to trade with our caravan to give them a decent amount of value for our new outpost. So, without further ado, it's time to find a location to begin digging. We're going to click OK, and we're going to zoom out. I'm going to take a real quick peek at this little creek. Fortunately, we were lucky enough to also have a wonderful waterfall, which is absolutely something I was looking for. As you can see, this brook kind of flows down here, rolling off the edge, falling real far down. Remember how I said that I wanted to find something with higher elevation? This is absolutely what I was looking for. I am ecstatic with this embark. Now, if we click on the dig button and scroll down, can maybe spot the aquifer. Doesn't look like it shows up. That's okay though. It's probably beneath this brook. That's usually where they end up being. So one of the first things that we're going to do, now that we're in this version of the game, is we are going to press Y on the keyboard. This is the work details menu. This is where jobs are assigned and where things are set up. By default, certain jobs are set to only selected does this, and other jobs are set to nobody does this, and some are set to everybody does this. So things like fishing, only the selected will do this. So only our dwarf here, Id, who's the proficient fisher dwarf, is going to go fish. Whereas everybody will go grab plants when they are available. And our miner, Zon, is the only one who's going to go mine, because only the selected will do this. You know, I think it would be wise for us to have a second miner early on. And after a quick look at the wagon, we do clearly have some extra picks, so I think we're going to assign some extra miners. We don't really need fishing right off the bat, as we do have some food and some drink in the supplies. So we are going to assign both Id and our expedition leader, Colette, to mining. Now, we need to pick a place to dig. This is one of the most important things to do early on. But before we do that, we're going to chop down some trees. Of course, the elves won't like this, but that's okay. There isn't too much that they can do about it, after all. Fortunately, this brook, of many kinds of rivers, is shallow, so we can walk across this. That is not a concern for us. Certain types of water is much, what's the word I'm looking for here? Dangerous. A brook is the safe type of water. The reason it's safe is because it's only ankle deep, whereas other types, such as a creek or a river, are dangerous and can cause dwarves to drown quite easily. Be very careful with these. Something else that I would like to note is I've seen a lot of people on the forums and around the subreddit talking about how dwarves have died to falling trees. If you have very densely populated trees, it's very wise to only assign one dwarf to chop down trees. Now the reason for this is when trees fall over, they fall away from the dwarf, which means they're very safe. However, sometimes logs can land in trees, and when they land in trees and other trees are chopped down, the logs that landed in the trees will fall directly down and could crush any dwarves in the area. So trees falling forward are safe and can't hurt dwarves, but just make sure that if you're going to clear cut an area, they're not too dense. And if they are super dense, maybe scatter a couple around. These aren't so bad, so I think we'll be okay. We're also going to take out these up top here. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a spot to dig. We're going to kind of look around. We have a lot of clay, in fact. A whole lot of clay, which means we're probably going to encounter that aquifer that we have in this area. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to move up 2 layers, or up 1 layer, and we're also going to remove these trees from right here, and right there, and of course the one right next to us. Once these trees are all down, I will resume the video. As those trees get chopped down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a zone to pasture my animals. As you can see, Goden here is working very hard to chop down all these trees, 51 years old, and quite a happy little dwarf with their profession. But we would like to get a nice spot for our animals to graze. So I'm going to make a zone. We're going to make a animal pen and pasture. This is so that any animals who do not have the ability to feed themselves, like dogs, can graze. They won't feed unless they are pastured. So we're going to pasture our 2 stray bulls here. We're going to pasture our reindeer, our water buffalo, our goat, our stray calf, and that's everything. Now, if you're curious about what animals are grazers, this is a very good place to consult the wiki, as this hasn't changed at all in this version. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves a spot for digging. We're going to channel out the top. What channeling does is it removes the entire layer, floor and all, so you don't need to worry about having pesky stuff hanging around on top. And then just up here, we're also going to channel this spot out. And it might look like we're digging into the creek, but we are not. We're going to channel out this spot right here, just so that we kind of have this nice little flat area. And this is where we're going to start digging. So we're going to move down, and we're going to dig along the edge of this creek. Now, I'm not sure where the aquifer is in this map, so it's going to be interesting to run into that. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to dig all the way down to here with this kind of nice large spot. I had some people asking me why I make such long hallways, and the main reason for this is if a threat shows up on the outside, we want to be as far away from that as possible. So we're going to start digging. As we move down towards the corner of the creek, we are going to wait until we hit rock. Now, the nice thing about an area like this is we're already in stone, which means it's unlikely that we're going to encounter an aquifer in this area. We may, however, still hit an aquifer, but that'll just be what it is. Once they're finished digging out this walkway, we will resume the video. Now that we've dug through the walkway, what you can see is we've found some limonite. Now, limonite, if you click on the ore itself, it will tell you what it is. This is an ore of iron. It's for making furniture and building. However, can also be smelted into more useful materials, as in iron. We're now going to make a small square stairway, and we're going to go down 5 layers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, like I said, I'm not sure where the aquifer is. So if we run into it here, we'll be doing a digging through it. Otherwise, we will be scouting the map elsewhere later to find the aquifer, as it is good to have an idea of where the main source of water is. Since we have this lovely creek right next door, there's a lot that we can do with water on this map. So we don't need to worry too much about finding the aquifer right away. However, it will be useful when we can find it. As the dwarves dig down, we can follow them. We found more limonite. They're continuing to dig down. We found dolomite, more stone. Now, something that I've seen a lot of brand new players doing is not digging to stone. You should always dig to stone. Dwarves are happier with smoothed walls. They're happier with engravings. They're going to be in a better mood regardless if they're in stone. Also worth noting, there is nothing to catch in the northern swamps, so our fisherman hasn't found anything. I think that this means it is time for us to go up to our work orders, go to Fisher Dwarves, and just for the time being, say nobody does this. Maybe when we hit the caverns, we'll allow them to fish down there once again. Now that we've dug down a ways, it's time for us to begin digging our fortress. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to dig a little entryway. We're going to kind of dig out a little circle, make it look nice, and then from here, we're going to move down the screen because the lower elevation is up north. So we want to work our way away from the upper layers up there. Once they're finished digging this out, we will continue. Now, I'm going to pause the game because we found something. Have a look at this. We found a damp wall. This means we've discovered where our aquifer is located, right here. So we're going to remove the direction that we are going and head in the other direction, or rather, head further down, because we are still encountering aquifer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of these stairs. We do have this little room here. However, I don't want to go too deep before we unload our wagon, because you want to get your wagon unloaded as quickly as possible in the early game. So I'm going to be building this little room up top here to avoid the aquifer a little bit more before we head further down. So I'm going to let them dig this out, and then we're going to get our wagon unloaded. It's not a bad thing that the aquifer is right here. In fact, I would say it's actually quite good. It just means that we need to get below it. So we're going to dig over here. The other thing that I would like to do is I would like to find out and confirm that this is in fact the aquifer and not an underground lake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig up above it and over and cut out a little space right here. Now, if this happens to be the aquifer, that is actually a good news for us because then we can put our well right here. If it's not the aquifer, then we are kind of SOL for now, and we've found the caverns, which isn't a bad thing. It's okay to find the caverns super early, but it might be a little awkward for long-term survival. Looks like we're finding more aquifer, in fact, so this will, in fact, become our storage place until we can get through this. So on this side, it becomes aquifer, and on this side, it may also still be aquifer. We do have 2 light aquifers on different biomes here, so we're going to need to get through it. But for the time being, it is all right that it is right here. In fact, I think it's a good thing. We're going to dig above and see if we encounter it here now as well. The dwarves are digging down through the little walkway. All right, Sweet. So we are going to need to go to deeper levels to really access parts of this fort. But that is fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our stockpile here for the majority of our goods, the goods that are in our wagon. So we are going to make an all stockpile, but go into custom. And there's some things we're going to remove here. We're going to remove wood. We're going to remove stones. And we are going to remove refuse. And we are going to remove corpses. Not necessarily in that order, but we do need to get the wagon unloaded regardless. So I'm now going to unpause the game, and we're going to wait for the dwarves to unload our wagon. Now, in regards to this aquifer, there are some ways we can get through it. If we go one layer above, we can channel through it and then build in walls to get rid of it. We can dig up into it and build walls to get around it, or we can simply go underneath it, which is my current plan. I do need to find the top of it, however, so now that we know where the aquifer is located, we could start from the top and work our way down through it. Keep an eye on your drinks early game, and keep an eye on your supplies early game. You don't want to run out of drink before you can start brewing. And looks like we already have a decent amount of fish, so I think we're off to a good start regardless. Looks like we've also got some flies buzzing around. That's probably because of the open fish. We're going to need to also get some crafting going. So we're going to do that at a lower layer. We're going to remove this attempt at digging through the aquifer. But before we do anything else really silly, what I'm going to do is we're going to get a little farm going. Just a surface farm going to hold us through for the first few years. Now, surface farming is the least efficient format of farming in Dwarf Fortress. But that is okay and acceptable because we will be making some irrigated farms here a little bit later. I'm building this little kind of square, and we're going to get it all dug out. So once they're finished filling up that stockpile down in the basement, and we've dug this out, I will continue talking. To check if your wagon is empty, once you think it is, click on it, and all you should see are the wood that makes up your wagon. That's the only thing that you should see. This is the thing that is used in the construction. We're now going to deconstruct our wagon, and we're going to pause the game. We're then going to hit B to open up the build menu, go to workshops, and there are 2 workshops that we would like to build right away for this area that are quite important. We're going to build a farmer's workshop, which is going to start working on the pigtails and cloth farms, and we're also going to build a still. Now, this is kind of a temporary holdover, as we're going to make better kitchens down in the basement soon. However, before we can do that, we just kind of want to get things rolling so that we have a steady supply. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to click on farming, we're going to go to still, and we're going to construct this, and we are going to select whatever stone is available. We're going to use the mudstone. Doesn't look that bad in this version of the game. Used to be really ugly in older versions of the game. Then we're going to open up farming once again, and we are going to make a, well, actually, sorry, we're going to open up farming once again, and we are going to make a farming workshop. Now, there's a setting that I would like to change while they're constructing these in the background. We're going to quickly go over to the labor menu. And if I open up kitchen orders, you can see we have plump helmets here. Now, when plump helmets are cooked, as you can see, this is green right now, it destroys the seeds so you can't plant more. If they are brewed, you get the seeds back. So we want to remove cooking as an option. By default, this is green. You want to set this to red. Once again, this is the labor menu, the kitchen menu, vegetables and fruit and leaves, plump helmets, remove cooking. Very simple little order. Can be assigned right away at the beginning of the game, and you will be happy for the first year. You can disable this after you have a steady supply of other farmed materials for drinks, but at least early game, you really need to set that to only brew. Now we're going to make ourselves a nice small farm plot. This will be more than enough for our dwarves early game, even though it is 1/5 as effective as the cavern brewing. We have a dwarf sleeping here, which may actually cancel this construction. I'm actually not sure if it will. We'll see. And the dwarf has finished it. Okay, so it doesn't. Now, we have plump helmets, plump helmets, plump helmets, and plump helmets. You do not need to worry about fertilizer, especially in the early game, and you do not need to worry about any of these settings. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on plump helmets. We're going to go to spring, plump helmets. We're going to go to summer, plump helmets. We're going to go to autumn, plump helmets. Now, we're going to notice immediately our dwarves are going to come flying in here and they're going to start planting, which is what we want to see. We're also going to expand this room just slightly. And this is going to become a seeds stockpile. We're going to move our seeds from the underground area where everything is stored. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to separate the seeds from the other food stockpile in the basement, because down below, where we have the majority of our stuff planted, we have just kind of a bunch of generic stockpiles with kind of everything. We have a generic stockpile with everything in it. We want to separate that out of that stockpile and begin sorting what we have in our fortress. So once this little corner is dug out, we are going to create a new stockpile. We're going to wait for the dwarves. It shouldn't take too much longer. Click on this button here to begin making the stockpile. Click and drag, and complete. Now, we're going to accept that and go to custom. From custom, we're going to go to food, and from food, we're going to go to seeds, and we're going to click all. We're going to back out of this menu by hitting the right mouse button, and then we're going to click on the barrels. We're then going to click on the number symbol or the pound sign on barrels. We're going to click 0. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to separate out all of the barrels and only put bags in this stockpile. There's a lot of pathing issues and organizational issues with barrels. They have gotten better in this variant of the game. However, I've still run into pretty consistent problems and heard a lot of reports of people having issues with barrels in their stockpiles. So we're going to remove that, just out of paranoia's sake, if nothing else. Then from here, we're also going to cut out a little bit more of this wall, just so the dwarves have a good amount of time to move around. The next thing we're going to do is move down to the bottom, where we have our storage, and we are going to go to this custom button for these stockpiles. We're going to go to food, we're going to select seeds, and we're going to hit none. Removing seeds from this stockpile is going to allow the dwarves to move up to the top and place all of the things that are needed in this stockpile here. Now, you might notice the dwarves tend to be hanging around where the original wagon was. We're going to need to replace that zone with a meeting zone. But before we can do that, we need to figure out where we're going to make our home. So we're going to dig a little deeper. We're going to click on the little pickaxe, go to stairs, and we're going to continue this stairwell. We're going to go down to -10. Now, we may run into caverns, which is okay, but probably wouldn't be optimal for this playthrough. But, you know, losing is fun, and if that's what happens, that's what happens. We're going to follow our dwarves as they move down and hope that we hit the aquifer floor. But it's hard to say. Now, as you can see, we've made it to the bottom, and we have these lovely shale walls. Once again, we're going to dig down. Let's make a little hallway. I personally am not a huge fan of straight lines, but that makes things easy. We can simply widen this a little bit and thin it out. Now, I would recommend avoiding doing single line and single file hallways. While they do work just fine, it forces dwarves to lie down while they pass each other in the hallways, which isn't really something that you want to see very often. We're now going to make a small room here, which is going to be our first meeting room. I think I might turn this into a temple later. And we're going to make a room over here, which is going to be for crafting. Now, fingers crossed, we are past the aquifer because it seems to be on either side of the map. However, we may hit it again, and if we do, we'll deal with that when we come to it. Let's unpause the game, and once these rooms are finished being dug out, I will return. All right, so now that these rooms have been dug out, up here at the top, if I click on the pickaxe, we can see some water here. We're not through the aquifer yet. However, I'm hoping that on the lower half of the map, we are in the clear. This is really good. I'm going to be able to show you some really interesting techniques that you can do with aquifers. And I had some funny comments on my aquifer short tutorial video where someone said, do dwarves really like being hit with water when they don't like being rained on? The answer is yes, actually. They do really like being misted. So we'll be able to have some fun with this and actually mess around with aquifers and experiment a little bit. And I can show you some interesting, more advanced techniques. But now that we're down underground, we need to do two things. This is going to become our meeting hall for right now. So the dwarves stop standing out on the surface, up in the rain, in the weather. You know, we're in late spring. It's been over a month. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a meeting zone. We're going to fill this small room up. So initially what we're going to do is we're just going to set it as an inn and tavern. We're going to click on this little magnifying glass. So click on the shield, set it to inn and tavern, click on the magnifying glass, and we're going to remove visitors. We don't want visitors until we're prepared for them. So I'm going to currently set it to just citizens and long-term residents only. Now over here on this side, we need wood down in the fortress so we can start making bedrooms. We're going to make another stockpile. We're going to place it right here, press accept, and we are going to select wood. While the dwarves move all the wood down here, I'm going to move back up to the surface, and we're going to start another growing zone. So now that we have this one here with all of these plump helmets planted, something that we can do is we could brew some alcohol and get more plump helmet spawn, or we can make a farming field for pigtails, which is what we're going to do. Now unpause the game and let the dwarves begin moving wood underground. We're going to go to workshops, and we're going to go to farming, and I'm going to build another farm plot. This one is going to be for pigtails. We are going to be using this for cloth and clothing and thread. That's why we built this farmer's workshop. Underneath the still, we're going to be brewing the plump helmets into wine. And in the farmer's workshop, we're going to be turning the pigtails into cloth. There's a job in the farmer's workshop that I'll show you as soon as the game finishes autosaving. Underneath add a new task, it's called process plants. Processing plants takes any cloth or fabric compatible plant and spins it into thread. From there, we'll be able to build a loom and we'll be able to make cloth. So it's a couple of steps, but not too bad. So we're going to select this and we're going to pause the game briefly because we are into summer now, which is when pigtails are in season. We're going to plant pigtails, and then in autumn, we're going to plant pigtails. In the winter and spring, pigtails aren't in season. So what we're going to plant instead are just more plump helmets so that we have extras. You know, you can never have too much booze in a dwarven fortress after all. Now we're going to go back underground. We're going to unpause the game, let the dwarves do their thing, and we're going to make 2 workshops. We're going to make a stoneworkers workshop, which is going to make doors so that we stay safe. And we are going to make a carpenter's shop, which is going to start making us beds. The first thing that we're going to make at the stoneworkers shop is a throne. And the throne is going to be how we're going to organize our fortress. So once these 2 workshops are completed and this stockpile is full, I'll continue talking. So as you can see, the stockpile is full and the 2 workshops are completed. We're going to pause the game. We're going to open up the stoneworkers shop, and I'm going to scroll down to throne. Or we could click on the magnifying glass and type in throne. As a side note, if we want to be picky about who makes it, if you select workers, you can select a specific dwarf to do this task. If you have a particularly talented stone carver, you're going to want them to do this task. But for this instance, we're just making a throne, so it's no big deal. We're now going to wait for our dwarves to make that throne. Then we're going to open up the carpenter's shop, and we're going to queue up 7 beds. Or at the very least, a decent number of beds. They're going to use this wood to make beds. Beds are only made out of wood, which is kind of an interesting thing for Dwarf Fortress, forcing you to cut down trees. I mean, the elves do hate it after all. And look at this. We already have dwarves singing. Ain't that lovely? However, there's something a little gross here. We have a keet, and it's attracting all kinds of vermin into there. We're going to have to deal with that soon. There is a way, and it's called cats, but until then, we'll have to just simply tolerate the vermin. Over here on the left, I would like to point out that we have some notifications. I would recommend just letting these sit here, unlike other games where you're tempted to constantly clear them, because there is no way to get these back once you've closed them. As you can see, somebody is fighting. We should see what's going on there. Well, seems to have ended. It was definitely an echidna falling down the waterfall, which happened while I was paused, but it seems to have gone away now. If you let the combat logs sit for too long, they will eventually vanish. So that is the one we're going to clear, but the rest we're going to leave open for the time being. Now, we're going to check the stoneworkers shop, and as you can see, no throne and the job is done, which means they must have made that throne. So we're going to select that throne, and we are going to construct it. And from there, we are going to assign a manager. Now, a manager is a dwarf that makes managing your fortress a lot easier. It's also the dwarf that Karens would like to speak with. But we're going to place our throne kind of in this hallway and make it into a meager office. So we're going to open up the zone tool, and we're going to create an office. Now, an office doesn't need to be anything of note, really. Just needs to be a single tile with a throne in it. If you want to give them something nicer, you can, but it is not necessary. Now, once your throne is constructed and you have the meager office assigned, press N on the keyboard or click on the little nobles button down here, this little crown. We're going to close the tutorial. Now, the nobles screen, this is where the magic happens. In the nobles screen, you can assign managers, you can assign specific items to specific tiers of management, you can pick exactly which dwarves you want to run your fortress and manage your fortress, and it's very important that you select the correct dwarves. Right off the bat, we're going to assign 3 roles. The first one, and the most important of which, is the manager. The manager we're going to give to our expedition leader. Now, if you don't prepare carefully, you will start off with somebody who has an adequate organization or some sort of basic organizational skills. It'll usually be your manager. Now, you might remember, we did give Colette, our expedition leader, a pickaxe. We're going to remove that now, so that they have more free time for paperwork. We're going to give him that, and we're going to back out of this screen, and we're going to press Y on the keyboard, and we are going to remove Colette, our expedition leader, from mining. And we are going to pass this task off to, say, our metal crafter, as we're not going to be doing metal crafting just yet. Then we're going to back out of this screen, and we're going to hit the noble screen again, and we're going to add 2 more jobs, the broker and the bookkeeper. The broker focuses on trading and estimates your fortress's value, so every item in your fortress has individual value. The broker is going to manage that, so we're going to also assign this to our expedition leader. I could also theoretically give it to Zahn, who does have some skills in appraising, but I prefer to just have these on one dwarf and let the others worry about the busy work. We're also going to assign this dwarf to bookkeeping. Now, bookkeeping is important. You see up here how we just have these rough estimations of numbers instead of specific numbers? If we give this to a record keeper, then they will count the amount of stocks we have in our stockpile and we'll know exactly what we have. So you can see this planter has proficient record keeping, but I like to keep it all on one dwarf. So we're going to give it to Colette once again. Once we get a wider number of dwarves, when we have maybe 15 or 20, we'll spread these out a little bit, put the broker onto a different dwarf, and put the bookkeeper onto a different dwarf. Note that both the manager and the bookkeeper both need a meager office. So just keep that in mind for when you assign your bookkeeper, you'll need to make a second meager office. Granted, it's just a chair, so how bad can that really be? Now, we're going to assign this dwarf to our office. We're going to press Z on the keyboard to open up the zone screen. We're going to click on this office, and we're going to click on the little dwarf face with the plus on it. From here, we are going to assign the expedition leader, our now very important dwarf, VIP, if you will. Then, you're going to notice immediately, our expedition leader runs over to the chair and starts sitting there. You're going to start noticing numbers appearing. Look at this. We're running low on drink. That won't do. So we're going to scroll back up to the surface, and we're going to select our still. But suddenly we have access to another menu, work orders. While it was here before, we can now click on the add new work order specifically for this shop. I'm going to click on brew drink from fruit or brew drink from plant. Because I'm not sure how much fruit we have, we're going to go for plant specifically, and I'm going to ask this dwarf to brew 40 plant. Now, as this harvest of plump helmets comes up, we'll gain more plants. You might notice some canceled jobs, but that's okay. When they run out, instead of this job disappearing, they'll simply let you know in the canceled menu, and they'll continue here. Now, if you want to get really fancy with it, you can click on this button, and we can add order conditions to it. We can add them to automatically repeat the job when we run low on drinks, automatically repeat the job when we run low on when we have enough food storage, and much more. This can get really complicated really quickly, and if you're me and you have the brain the size of a peanut, it very quickly ends up with a lot of job cancellations. So at the very least, for whatever it's worth, I prefer to just kind of assign jobs as needed and do the managing that way. It generally works for me, but if you want to go a little bit more in depth with things, that's how you do that. Now from here, they're going to begin brewing. We're now going to scroll back. Actually, let's stay back up here for a second. We're also going to assign a job to the farmer's workshop. We're going to ask them to process plants and begin repeating that order. Now, process plants is what we're going to do. But never mind. Apparently, we have no plants that are capable of being processed right now. I mean, well, I guess we'll have to go acquire some. So we're going to move out onto the surface and take a look at our surface plants. What do we have? We have muskmelons. We have more muskmelons. We have even more muskmelons. Do we have any surface plants that could be used? We have ratweed. We have almond tree saplings. We have split, which can be brewed. Longland grass also can be brewed. We have quinoa. Split. I'm not seeing any chicory. Peach trees. Garlic. Well, lovely. Regardless of whether or not we can make cloth from them, I think it's important that we begin brewing. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the gather plant tool, and we're going to select kind of a square here. These are all going to go into our inventory. They will be brewable, they will be usable, and we can use those to keep our fortress fed before we really get large harvests and before the first traders show up. Now, speaking of traders, they will be showing up in the fall, so we want to have some sort of trade good by then. We have noticed a couple gems down here, so I think we're going to dig those out real quick. I'm going to show you a little trick here. If you click on the mining tool and click on the advanced options for mining, there are two buttons here, dig normally as well as auto. Now, auto will automatically select any ores and dig out the entire vein, unless it hits water. Keep that in mind. Or we can only designate ore, or alternatively, we can dig only gems. We're going to go for auto mining this gem vein right here, not vine. We're going to let them do that, and we're going to cut those gems. We're going to cut those gems by building a gem cutter shop. This is rapidly becoming my favorite way to do trading early on, as it's an easy, high-value item at a decent payout, and it will let us get the things that we need from the first round of traders. We're also going to build our trade depot, which can be found right here. Now, this is a rather large building, so we're going to need a place to put it. As you can see, it's not going to fit, so we're going to have to dig out a little further. Let's see if we can go a few tiles over to the right here. Please note that you will need to turn off auto mining after you've assigned it, and I always forget to do that anyway. So we're going to dig out a little further, and this is where we're going to put our first trading caravan, or our first trading post. We'll also note that there's a bunch of beds here, which we can use to sleep in. We're going to use those by selecting furniture and then selecting beds. We'll just select use closest material and keep building after placement so that they just keep building once they run out. And we're going to select those beds. And then we're going to go to the zones tool again. We're going to make a dormitory. This is going to act as kind of our temporary sleeping spot. Now place those beds, place that dormitory, and then unpause the game and allow the dwarves to simply go up here and put stuff away. Look here, we have that pigtail thread that I talked about earlier. We could make a loom and start getting some more fabric going. Not entirely necessary at this exact point in time, but something to think about for the near future. Now, because we've assigned a manager at this chair, something else that we can do is if we press U to open up the units screen, which is the labor screen, or sorry, if we press Y to open up the labor screen, we'll be right next to the work orders screen. And then here we can add mass work orders for every workshop. I'm going to add something for our mason shop. We're going to make rock tables. Let's do 10 of them, which is the default. We're going to click on this magnifying glass, and because I like things to be color coordinated, we're going to make them out of jet. Then I'm going to queue up a second one. We're going to make rock tables. Or not tables, sorry, rock thrones. And we're going to queue up 10 of them. And once again, we're going to set them to be made out of jet, just so that they're color coordinated. Once we're completed those, we are going to make a second zone down here, which is going to become our tavern. We're going to convert this one over here into a temple. But I'm going to just be quiet for a little bit until all of these jobs are finished up, and then we will resume. Now, as you can see, this dwarf up here is mining out this tiny little vein of gems. Now that we've done that, we're going to open up our gem cutter shop, and we're going to make some trade goods. We're going to cut gems and set that to repeat. They're just going to cut all of the available gems that we've found so far. We're then going to scroll back up, and we're going to actually complete that trading depot now. We're going to select the trading depot and build it in the corner here. It's just going to use the closest materials, as that's how we have it set currently. We're going to scroll back down, and we're going to take a look at our work orders and see how they're progressing. Looks like we've made some tables and some thrones, so it's probably time to get that tavern up and running. We do want to get this done quickly and also get a temple up and running quickly, just so our dwarves can get their basic needs sorted without having to worry too much about their long-term mental health, as dwarves will get upset rather quickly if they don't have access to a temple and a tavern. So we're going to dig out some more spots, and as you can see, or as you might remember, we have thrones working, cut gems working, and currently the carpenter's not doing anything. Well, what can we do with the carpenter? Well, we do have a free dwarf, so I think it's time for us to make a crafts dwarf shop. This is one of the more common shops where a lot of things get done. We're going to place that down right here, and we're going to use that to make some mugs. Once this is complete, that's probably going to call it for episode 1. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to open up the manager screen once again. We're going to go to work orders. We're going to open up the work orders, and we're going to type in rock mug. We're going to select that. 10 of 10 rock mugs. I think we can make a couple more than that. We can sell any extras off to the first trader. They're going to begin working on that shop. And we're also going to continue digging this out. We're going to transfer this original zone from a temple or from a tavern over to a temple. So we're going to change this into a temple. Now, we have a bunch of different options here. You can see which gods are the most popular and who worships what. We've got a bunch of worshippers for Idor the Livid. We also have Reg the Cradled. And we have Taron the Great Fate. Tubal, Asmil, and Doran the Crystal of Turquoise, which isn't very popular. Then we have 2 specific religions. Once we have 10 worshippers for one of these religions, they might ask us for a more specific temple. But right now, we're just going to give them a worshiping place. So this, instead of a tavern, is now a temple. Over here, we're going to smooth a little bit of flooring. Now, you don't need to do this before you place stuff down. However, it will increase the value of the room just slightly. And because these thrones and tables are getting finished, we're going to queue up another work order for some doors. Going to make maybe 10 doors. And we're actually going to increase the priority of these doors through the work orders up to the top. Now, the reason we're increasing the priority of these doors is because we want there to be some defenses for this fortress before we finish this episode. Also, over here on the carpenter's shop, we're going to queue up something else. We're going to pause the game, and we're going to go down to barrels. Now, if you notice, there's this canceled job here. It says that it needs unrotten fermentable foods. It also says that it needs empty storage. So we're going to give it some storage. We can make wooden barrels, or alternatively, if that's not your flavor, we could make rock pots at the craft store shop. But we're just going to make a work order for wooden barrel, and we're going to make 25. It's a pretty good number. We got plenty of wood, and we're also going to probably need to hack down some more trees up on the surface. Just want to get a good number of things going and have the dwarves decently satisfied with their living space. Once all this has been dug out, I will return, and then we will finish up the video. All right, now that things are dug out and the jobs are getting finished, we're going to construct our thrones and build up our tavern. We're going to select tables, keep building after placement, and use closest material. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to back out of that. That'll be enough tables for every dwarf. And then we're going to make chairs and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Next, we're going to make a small stockpile. We're going to place this up top. Now, this small stockpile is going to be set for drinks. Just drinks. Nothing else. What else do you need in a tavern? Truly. At least for dwarves. We're going to select plant drinks and click all. Now, this will allow them to have something readily available right next to them. And then we are going to go into zones. We're going to make a meeting area. And we're going to just leave it on the default paint tool. Now, remember, we can expand this tavern later or move it elsewhere in the fort if needed. We're going to build around the corner. We're going to erase a single tile. Right there. And now, if we wish to change the name of this tavern, we can, and I'll show you how. Select Inn and Tavern. By default, it's called the Barricaded Breakfast. I actually quite like that name, but just for science's sake, if you want to change the name of a tavern, click on the little magnifying glass and click on this quill. You can change the name here by going through the Dwarven language and selecting your front compound, rear compound, the of X, your adjectives, etc. We're going to back out from there. We're going to queue up one more thing for this tavern before we're going to consider it complete, or at least for now. We're going to select our stoneworker shop and make one coffer. Now, a coffer is a rock box of sorts. Push that up to the top of the list, and we're going to let this dwarf run off, grab the thing to make a coffer, and quickly get it done. Once a coffer has been built, we can put those rock mugs that have been worked on at the crafts dwarf shop directly into our tavern. Now, the way we're going to do that is by selecting chest, which is going to be that coffer. We're going to place it right in here, right near the tables as soon as it's ready to go, which it clearly isn't yet. Let's just select this and wait until the coffer disappears. There it goes. Now we are going to select the chest, place the coffer. I beg your pardon, game? They just made the coffer. Maybe they're moving it to the furniture stockpile. Let's try that one more time. Dwarves, do you have it ready yet? Some migrants have arrived. Seems like we're off to a good start. Select the coffer once again. Try to place it. Perfect. Once the coffer is ready, they will fill it up with some mugs. We're up to 12 dwarves now, as you can see. We're going to press Z to select the zone menu, and we're going to click on the magnifying glass. Now, as you can see, there's this option here that says goblets. We can turn this number up or down. The number of goblets that we desire here, as you can see, they're already bringing some down, is 25. So they're going to bring as many goblets as they have, and they're going to put them in the tavern. They're then going to use these to drink out of these barrels once the barrels have been placed in this room. This is the beginning of a new series with the goal of acquiring a baron or some other royal. I hope that you've been enjoying it so far, and I gotta say, at least at this point, I'm much happier with the finished product. Thank you very much for watching my videos, and to everybody who's jumped onto the channel over the last 5 days, you're absolutely incredible. Thank you very much for the support, and I hope to see you in the next one.